All right. Hello and welcome to Tantrums and Tangents, the talk show, with me, Vingroth, and Saberwolf.
Hey guys.
So today we're going to talk about barbarians.
Oh yeah.
I hope I spelled that right. No, that's Barbarians.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh no.
That totally ruins everything.
No.
Let me try and fix that.
Okay, cool.
No, actually, is that right?
Let me take a look.
I don't even know.
Yeah, you got it right.
Holy
Barbarian.
shit. I just didn't realize it had barbar in the word. How about that?
Yeah. Barbarian.
Well, there you go. So cool. I didn't even know it was spelled right.
Legit.
But yeah, so I've been watching a few mythical related shows, a lot of fantasy sort of stuff, and barbarians are cool, so I want to talk about them.
Absolutely. I mean, as every person wants to do, right? Like, who
Right.
doesn't want to talk about barbarians every now and then?
Right. Now, I come from sort of a background of occasionally in Elder Scrolls games, you can play like a barbarian type class character. But I also come from the D&D spectrum of things, so I sort of know how they originally spec'd out the class of barbarian.
Right.
Not just sort of the way you roleplay things, but the actual way you build a character.
Right.
But when I think barbarian, I always think the distinctive feature is the Barbarian Rage. The fact that they go into battle, they dig into some deep primal rage, and then they just go nuts.
Right. No, yeah, that's legit. Like that like Barbarian Rage feature that we see in like D&D characters is it actually comes from a different sort of a different heritage. It's long time ago there was people called Vikings.
Yeah.
And they had a special group of people called berserkers, and they were people who just lost their fucking shit and like would run gloriously into battle, and most of them ended up dead. But that was where like Barbarian Rage as an idea, like this cultural concept, came from, because
Right.
barbarians were like the invaders from the east, like in England. So that's how barbarians with that whole rage thing like actually came into being in Dungeons and Dragons.
Right, and sometimes historically it's attributed with either some sort of like psychoactive drug,
Right.
or it's a combination of that and like a ritual that they'd bond themselves with like the spirit of a creature and thus become more ferocious.
Yeah. And that is something that is being looked at more closely in more recent editions of Dungeons and Dragons. Like,
Oh, yeah?
It used to be play barbarian, and a barbarian just had rage, and like it was on you completely to like figure out why.
Right.
But but now in like fourth and fifth edition, they're like, yeah, you like tap into this primal spirit, and like you can choose different animal spirits to like get your rage powers from, and they sort of enable your barbarian differently. Like I believe there's one where you can pick like a wolf totem to like get your primal animal spirit from, and it makes you better fighting with your allies. And I think there's also like the one that comes to mind is like the bear, and that one's like literally just like smash things better.
Right, of course.
Just like do more damage, be stronger.
So as we were talking about the whole like sometimes they rage and sometimes they rage with purpose, I just got this like little image in my head of a barbarian with a therapist. I don't know why I'm so angry, but I'm just angry all the time.
Right. So
I don't know where it comes from. Maybe it was my childhood.
Right. It's like on his couch. I think my rage issues come from my father.
Which might be the most, noble thing ever, right? You inherit the primal rage from your father and carry on that rage.
Right.
Oh shit.
Yeah, man. Like, barbarians are fucking cool, and like pretty much they have been.
Yeah, right. They're a combination of a lot of things that where it's this mixture of like almost like a like total like tribal situation where they have one leader and they move with him, but it's out of mutual respect, so there's like some sort of honor in there like mixed in as well. And then there's also like this ritual and like natural aspect of like you don't when I think of barbarian, I always think of a dude in nothing but like a fur loincloth and a giant weapon, right? They don't wear like ironclad armor. Like their knowledge and wisdom, though limited in perspective to other classes and whatnot, is more for like the specifics of like dismembering somebody, right?
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't say battle because they're not tactful. They're just really good.
Well, I think being a barbarian immediately precludes you from being tactful, but I think what you meant was tactical.
Yeah, my bad.
No, it's cool. It was funny either way.
But no, that's what I meant. Yeah, tactical. Yeah.
No, it's totally cool. I dig it.
Hands off, dude. Oh my gosh.
Hold, I need my space. Personal bubble. You know what I'm saying?
I'm raging here. Don't touch me.
Right. Like, I'm sorry, sir. Perhaps you needed this napkin. Like, this barbarian just gives you like a napkin and starts telling you about etiquette. Yeah, I mean that's bullshit though. Like barbarians are not about like being civilized, right? Like that's whole notion.
No, yeah, like, they're nomadic. Generally they're nomadic. Sometimes they're not, but like even if they're not nomadic, it's like these giant bone-strewn fortresses of like terror, and why the fuck would you ever attack that?
Right.
Like it's not even like with all of our might and our siege engines and advanced technology we can take them on. It's like, no, let's just not, please.
Why would you want to? They're scary peeps. They're
right.
Scary people.
Right.
But yeah, like so I was just looking it up. And I was wondering like where the origin of the word barbarian comes from. I was really thinking like etymologically, like where the word came from.
Yeah.
But the definition I got was in ancient times, a member of a community or tribe not belonging to one of the great civilizations, such as Greek Rome or Christianity. I'm not really sure how Christianity becomes like its own culture, but whatever. I mean, like if we talk about like the northern portion of Europe, sure, makes sense.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, like I've been recently rewatching some Spartacus, and like on the surface, it's not really about barbarians, but like you've got like these tribes out there, the Gauls and the Thracians, and like the Celts and all these other people,
right?
And like they get brought to Rome and Italy as slaves for the Roman Empire, and they refer to them as being beasts and barbarians and savages. And, like, these are the type of people who we're talking about historically.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're talking fictionally, it's just somebody who comes from somewhere that is not here.
That's not civilized. Right.
Oh, hey, Dirge. Didn't even see you.
And how's it going, Dirge? Yeah. We're just talking about barbarians because they're freaking cool.
They are. And like, I don't know. I know that I suggested to you that you watch Fangbone on Netflix, and like that's kind of what's got us on this kick.
That is.
Another much funnier, well, not much funnier, but a very comical TV show called Dave the Barbarian, which was sort of like a satire on barbarism. Like it wasn't really about people being barbarian like. It was kind of just like there's this like barbarian like setting, and there's these people there who call themselves barbarians, and some of them are more civilized than others. So oh good.
Dave of I'll have to look that up. Like, I haven't seen that.
Yeah. It's the art style is very, very simplistic, but it's really funny. I like it a lot. The titular Dave the Barbarian is like very afraid of things. He like wants people to like be more civilized all the time, but he's like this big hulking dude wearing like huge furs, and he has like a big sword, right? So,
Right.
But like in the show, he's got a little sister who is this tiny, basically slavering beast, right? So she's like the most barbarian person in the show.
That's pretty awesome.
But give it a watch if you can find it, and if you get the time. It's pretty funny.
Cool. But yeah, in
Especially
Oblivion,
if you've been enjoying.
Yeah. Jared just mentioned in Oblivion they have a barbarian class. Yeah,
Oh,
they do.
cool.
It was focused in light armor and blunt weapons. Sometimes swords.
Gotcha.
Sometimes it depends. There's when it comes down to it, when you think of barbarians, it's either giant axes or giant claymores.
Right.
And they both fit.
Big fucking sword, big fucking axe.
And they usually have, at least, you know, if they're talking about like a whole tribe, there's usually one guy who has a hammer.
Yeah.
Usually.
For
and
sure.
it might just be the blacksmith doubling up to using his normal hammer to just bash some skulls.
Right. And that's a fair assessment.
Right.
But yeah, like, so whenever we talk about like barbarians in general, one of the thing that always comes to my mind is like Conan, right?
Right, of course.
And yeah, right, and Grognak.
And Grognak in Fallout, right.
Right. Again, meeting the stereotype. Has an axe, like it's a battle axe, has like his like
just
the
loincloth.
Is like cuffs and like
right, yeah.
A loincloth or
sometimes
something?
they have like one circlet and like long hair too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's a very Conan image.
That
right
is,
there. The,
yeah.
like the circlet, the long hair, like no shirt, just like crazy ripped muscles and all that shit. But yeah, like it's interesting because like we think of Conan as being a barbarian, but like Conan in the books thought of himself as a thief.
Huh.
Because he would like break into places and steal their treasure. Like it was a thing that he liked to do. And he considered himself to be more of a thief and usurper than he did a barbarian at all. But like from the outside looking in, he is like this uncivilized, uncultured man beast, which is why he gets the barbarian title, right?
Right.
So yeah.
What I think is so funny about barbarians, though, is they get this sort of role put on them too. Right. Imagine him sneaking into homes with a battle axe.
I mean, he does. So
that'd be hilarious. But you know, it's very funny. I always find that the portrayal of barbarians, at least comically, is they don't have a lot of vocabulary. And they basically only talk in one-liners or borderline caveman dialogue. Right.
Now, I think a lot of that, like that sort of dialogue, it comes off as funny, but like if you think about it, it almost makes sense because they don't know our language.
Right, of course. If they're so far removed from civilization, they either...
like they know some other language.
Yeah,
right?
they
like
either know some other language or like... I was just thinking, like, maybe in some cultures they don't even have a language. They just understand what they need and go after it.
Right. And that's true to a certain extent. Like, they are basically cavemen with battle axes.
And maybe a little less hairy, but that's arguable.
Yeah. Right. But yeah.
And they always have great names, don't they?
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's never just Bill. It's Bill the Skull Crusher of Crimson Tide or some shit. Like, they always get, like, some really cool name, even if they haven't done anything, really. Like, sometimes, like, it might be, like, Steve the Unwise.
Right.
Even though he's unwise, he gets a title. Like, how cool is that? You could suck at literally everything, but even though you're a barbarian, you get, like, a cool title. Even if it's not cool.
Exactly. But yeah, it's all that like harkens back to the to like
Bill the bread maker of destruction.
Excellent. But yeah, like that harkens back to like I've just completely lost the my frame of reference. But like old tales of like Beowulf, right?
Right.
Like when like people would sit around and they would brag about their stuff. Like boasting was a thing that you did.
Oh yeah.
And like if you put a title at the end of your name, it's like this brag that I've got going on immediately because people know me as this other name that's not just what I am. Also, it helps to just like distinguish people, right? Like there may be Bill the bread maker of destruction, and there may also be like Bill the unwise, or and then there could also be like Bill like sieger of all fortresses, right? And like maybe he was actually like really good at laying siege to places.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's unlikely. Barbarians don't generally do sieging particularly well, except with like battering rams. But you know,
and handheld, mind you.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Usually they don't construct anything really besides tents. Maybe.
Exactly. Yeah, maybe depending on where they're at and how much they need to like carry. Right?
And sometimes their own weapons. Although sometimes they're definitely on the more thief side, and they basically get whatever they have from plundering.
Yeah, for sure. And like plundering is also a thing that barbarians get like a lot of like bad rep for.
Yeah, and another big thing. Right. Ted the tent maker of unholiness, but. You know, another big thing was this whole, like, you carried on a legacy, right? So it's not just Bill the bread maker of destruction and Ted the tent maker of unholiness. You're son of Ted, the tent maker of unholiness, right?
Right.
And so, like, one big thing for a barbarian is you're always son to someone who already has a title normally. And you have to come up with your own title to be that much more awesome for your next of kin to carry on. And then put that horrible pressure on your children.
Right. So
that basically every barbarian has to seek greatness or else be forever under the name of their father.
Right. And like that's the whole idea, right? Like one-upsmanship is a huge thing in like barbarian culture. So you're you're like Steve the unclean, son of Ted the foul, son of like Richard the Defiler, right? So
right.
Of course, none of these names are appropriate to barbarians, but like, who gives a crap? It's great.
Right.
But yeah, that's a thing. Like that you gotta be better than your dad, so that when your name comes next on the list of like your heritage, you look better.
Right. Because, you know, people back then didn't last too long, especially barbarians.
Right.
So it's not like, well, my grandfather was, you know, Bill the Usurper. People probably don't even know who he is by now.
Right.
Unless, of course, a bard sung about it.
Yeah. I mean, you know, campfire stories. Like that's the whole reason why.
I don't know though. Right? Do bards really sing about barbarians, or are they considered too lowly to have stories?
I mean, well, okay. So it sort of depends on like who the bard is, right? Like you've got bards that Ragnar the Red. See, that's a good barbarian name.
It is.
But yeah, so like if your bard is in like a kingly court, it is likely that they are not singing the praises of the barbarian hordes to the east.
Right.
Like they're probably talking about how somebody in the court, most notably perhaps the king, slew them, the barbarian horde. But so they might come up in bardly tales and songs, but it's less likely to be as like a positive thing in higher station areas.
Right.
Now, if you're talking about sort of like loosely a bard being somebody who tells a story in an entertaining way, then like you may have a dramatic sort of telling of or retelling of a tale around a campfire in a barbarian like encampment, and when that happens, you're just, you know, of course they would praise Ragnar the Red or Ted the tent maker of unholiness. Like it's just
what made that tent so unholy. I need to hear the song.
like the tent was defiled and all Christians trembled before it. Like, like that's just how it works.
Right.
That's being a barbarian. So, I mean, like, so bards, I think, have to, like, if in this fictional world where bards like travel between the civilized and uncivilized lands, like a bard would have to be very careful about what song they chose to sing.
Right. You don't want to go into like a huge city and then sing about, how basically someone plundered and they don't even. Oh man, imagine being a bard. You go into the city with this song and you realize, oh shit, the city that got sacked is literally the city I'm singing to right now.
Yeah, that'd be a
bad.
problem. That's
Right.
That's a mistake. That's a mistake.
Oh man.
Yeah, but like, I don't know. Like, and then so, what's that video game? Brutal Legend. Do you remember?
I don't remember that one. No.
Okay. It was basically like somebody's love letter to like metal inspired art. From like the 80s and in the 90s as well. But the game was relatively recent, and the person they got to be the protagonist was Jack Black. So like,
really?
Yeah, dude, it's fucking awesome. Like there's this crazy story, like there's this I don't know, like modern day metal band, but they're like basically like emo bitches, and they don't know anything, like they like don't know what it really means to be metal. At like the beginning, it starts in like our world, and Jack Black's just like a roadie. Like he's just in the back, like just like smoking a cigarette, going like, ugh, fucking kids these days. Like just having like this I'm so old moment when he's like thinking about like old school metal and how it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Something happens, a portal to hell gets ripped open. I think he might have died, basically. But anyways, he goes to hell, and in hell it's just metal, like as shit. And he basically goes on a quest to basically overthrow and conquer hell. And it's super barbarian, and it's super metal, and it's really cool. At some point, you realize they've tricked you into playing an RTS.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like, you go around and you, like, gather up resources and stuff, and then at some point they're like, okay, and now you enter the battle phase, and, like, your like, Jack can, like, use these demon wings to, like, fly up into the air and survey the land and give commands to troops, and then he needs to make sure they gather resources, and then you lay siege to your enemy. And I'm like, wait a minute.
Did you just trick me into an RTS game?
Well, you just told me that I need to resource manage my units. But yeah, no, it was a really cool game, and like the RTS part of it didn't feel like as weird as I normally feel RTS gets. But yeah, so like it's a really cool game. I suggest at least trying it until you like get bored with it or whatever. The soundtrack is amazing, and the story is really cool, and the voice acting is amazing because it is.
Right. And yeah, Tarantoga. Yeah. How's it going?
Yeah, no, for sure, man. Like, again, it was like, I thought it was a good game. Like the imagery in that game is like ridiculously awesome.
Yeah. I remember one cool thing was I just remember when you were talking about like the metal aspect. When I was in high school, there was this band like that, a couple people had formed, and they sang like totally metal songs. They had like, I wouldn't call it like, it's the screaming metal, that sort of thing. And they have the dude with a low voice and stuff like that. But what was cool was he did that sort of metal, like heavy metal, but the lyrics were basically about barbarian adventures.
Right.
And what's so interesting is that as nerdy as it sounds, it was badass. Like,
Right.
one of them was literally about chasing, like, a magical goat up a mountain. And it sounds dumb as hell. But, I mean, think about it. Hercules, like, one of the things was getting the golden fleece.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's not a terribly awful creature if you think about it. Like, and that's one of the interesting things about barbarian quests is, like, they're put to this really high level where it's not just, I chased a goat up a mountain. It's, I chased a goat up the mountain and the rocks tumbled from the face and, like, you know, frickin' your boots shook the mountain as you climbed and what, like, all this sort of stuff. And it, like, gets real extreme really fast.
Absolutely. And, like, I think that's part of what is appealing about, like, the whole barbarian thing, and it goes back to that boasting, bragging thing that we were talking about earlier.
Right.
But, like, yeah, like, the more extreme and sensationalized you can make the story about, like, whatever conquest it is that you have, the more renown you are likely to gain, right? And, like, sometimes it spirals out of control, and you hear stories about yourself, and you're like, I don't remember doing stuff like that.
Right? Yeah, I've heard that a couple of times.
People say I did it.
Yeah, but yeah, it's so interesting. Like, these, it's almost like barbarians. They're just, if you think about it, they're just people. You know, they're just dudes in loincloths with big weapons, and maybe they don't even save the day. Like, they don't have to be good. They could be evil. They could be looting a town. You know, they could be doing something terrible. But, like, the cool thing about it is, like, they just kick a lot of ass, and in doing so become more than, like, just human or just a person.
Right. No, absolutely. And that's like, I think that's, like, the appeal of, like, barbarians in, like, in fiction and shit, right? Like, it's they are larger than life by virtue of just the way they live their whole existence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, everything is an epic quest. Everything is, like, more than like just you or I, like, make our own lives out to be, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and like that approach to living makes things a whole lot more interesting for people whom you're talking to, for yourself. Like, I actually used to do that barbarian sensational thing when I was, like, just getting out of high school, just starting college kind of time. Like, everything was like an epic story. And I apparently actually at some point developed a way of telling stories to friends of mine. And, like, it was really funny because, like, I sat down, or I was just, like, talking about a thing, and I was like, oh man, I need to tell you guys this thing. And they're like, oh, it's story time.
Right. There's definitely a way to regale a story, and the emphasis that you put in the words and, like, all this sort of stuff that can really just grab people's attention.
For sure. And, like, that's the way you emphasize things, where you, like, put your inflection and like how you elevate the language that you're using makes the story sound more incredible. And if you do that enough, it starts to become second nature. Like, with me, I didn't even remember, like, how I'd gotten to that point, but I'd been, like, honing this ability for a long time, and at some point I just started doing it automatically. But I think that that's actually just something that barbarians did.
Right, exactly. I noticed a lot of things when barbarians talk about each other is they use a lot of metaphors.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just, you know, he went to go get a bale of water. It's he charged with the might of 1,000 horses and scooped up a tidal wave into a bucket, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then, like, brought it back and, like, unleashed it upon his enemies or whatever.
Right. When all he did was, like, maybe splash a dude in the face.
Right. Or Right.
But like it's one of those things where like you almost
hell.
from the way you imagine it, you see like this dude like charging across a dusty plain and seeing this river, and like the bucket just runs through the water and wave crash, and then he just like like you imagine like sort of like in Sparta, like the guy's hit by the pail of water and he's like thrown 100 feet and stuff like that. Like just from the way you can retell a story, like changes it from being a normal act of combat or barbarism into like some huge thing.
Yeah. No, for sure. And no, there's nothing really to and on top of that. That's like perfect.
Yeah.
Tarantoga, what is best in life? I don't know, man. It depends on what you think is best in life, really. But like if you ask me, retelling epic tales, like having a good time, like not really bragging, but like exaggerating truths to everybody, right? And
Crushing your enemies.
One's enemies.
There you go. Now, that's a huge thing for barbarians too. You gotta crush your enemies.
Well, I mean, you go and you like pillage and plunder the countryside for so long, you're gonna make enemies.
Right, of course, right. Because actually, that's one of the things about barbarians, at least fictionally, is that they're nomadic. They're nomadic tribes, and they really don't have farming or domesticated animals or any of that advanced stuff, so they're always plundering and stealing stuff from nearby civilizations, some of which who don't deserve the barbarism.
Right, no, of course.
But like, it's very interesting how they sort of end up surviving by basically just taking all the good shit from other civilizations.
Accurate.
Or small villages. Taking stuff from
Yes.
civilizations might just all get them dead. Oh, that was a Conan Barbarian reference? Nice.
Conan and I don't see like eye to eye on a lot of things.
Right. There are some things that barbarians
telling.
are known to do terrible things, right?
That's correct.
But we're talking about the barbarians who play in D&D and Elder Scrolls games and other games where you're more likely to be doing good things. Not always, but more likely to be doing good things.
Right. I mean, yeah, it depends on a lot of stuff. But yeah, generally speaking, if you're playing a video game or a role-playing game, or rather, let me rephrase, a tabletop role-playing game, it is more likely that you are going to be at least a little bit cajoled into playing like a heroic role.
Right. Because it's kind of tough to be like, well, today I need, like... Actually, that is one of those interesting things I just realized. Do barbarians even really use money? Because really, I feel like they skip the middleman and go for directly what they need. Right.
I mean, like, it depends. Like, Conan at least had like a huge treasure trove. I don't think there's like a time in which Conan would have ever necessarily like chosen to spend any of it. I think he could have just eschewed with spending any money ever. But yeah, like you're probably right. Like, barbarians in general don't barter.
Yeah, right. Like, they probably have a lot of gold, but it's right, Tarantoga. They have a lot of gold, and it's a sign of power, but they probably don't spend it, really. It's more like our barbarian tribe has more piles of gold than your barbarian tribe, thus we're better.
Exactly.
But yeah, that'd be very interesting to see a barbarian go into town and be like, I need the milk from your cow. How much?
Right.
I feel like their barter wouldn't be that high.
Right. I'm just sitting here and thinking like, oh man. So you're so basically what you've got is this barbarian character like no shirt, just like a loincloth, huge sword, and like this tiny little note, and he's just like, okay, from
It's
the
like a
market,
shopping list.
Yeah, he's got a shopping list.
Eggs,
I need
milk, bread.
eggs,
Who do I have to kill to get the bread?
and the skulls of my enemies.
Oh man. Okay, Convoy, awesome. Yeah, we're just talking about barbarians, so feel free to tell us your like favorite thing about barbarians.
Cool deal. Yeah, man. But I swear this notion that there's a barbarian who goes shopping is really getting to me right now.
But like, how much is intimidation factor put into bartering, right?
Right.
And I'm talking like all mythical things, not just barbarians, but I feel like you're some badass dude who walks into a place and you're like, I need a new pair of armor. Are you, as a merchant, gonna be like that ballsy to like raise the price? Like, are you gonna try to get like more gold from this guy, or are you gonna try to lowball it and hope he doesn't get angry? Like,
I mean, I think it depends on how. I think it depends on like how intense and like they get, like how violent they are with you, right? Like if they show up and like they slaughter people in front of you for not giving them what they want, you're probably less likely to charge them at all.
Right. It's like, please don't kill me. Here, have this.
Right. If they show up and they're big and scary, I mean, like, there's big scary people now. Like, we don't necessarily think that they deserve a lower price just because they're big and scary and they might hurt us. It requires a judicious application of force to get a discount because you're a big scary person.
Oh
right?
my gosh, that is hilarious, Convoy. In Crusader Kings 2, there's a Viking story where you can raid every year and you can capture the Pope and sacrifice him to the gods.
That's amazing.
I feel like that's actually Oreozilla. We were actually talking about barbarians and metal, and I was recalling a band in high school that basically was like scream metal, and they all their stories were basically about barbarian sort of crazy questing adventures. It was awesome.
For sure.
But that's a huge thing in barbarians too, this sort of like ritual aspect, right? It's their barbarian rage is more than themselves, and they have to sometimes sacrifice things to it.
Right.
They might have like a some sort of shaman or wise woman as well as part of their tribe that sort of channels that pagan god sort of thing.
Yeah.
Or ancient one or something. But there's super mutants are somewhere in between, barbarians are somewhere in between super mutants and Fallout Raiders. Right,
for sure. Like that's actually about right.
Yeah, because Dirge is right. One of the drops that you can get from Fallout 4 super mutant is a note that says "Kill, loot, return."
Right. No, absolutely. It's, I don't know, like there's a lot of like superstition that goes along with the whole like barbarian thing too, right? Like,
that's true, right?
Yeah, because you got this belief in like magic and sorcery and whatnot, and like the wise people of the tribe are sort of like pseudo wizards and stuff. There's a lot of like we have to do these things so that we can please our gods, so that we will destroy our enemies, and I don't know. I enjoyed that part of it. I always struggle with it personally whenever I'm trying to like emulate that at through role playing games and stuff. I'm always just sitting here going like, yeah, I get it. Like there's like this pseudo religious thing going on. But like I don't normally think that way, so it's hard for me to like switch into actually thinking about it.
Right. Right, Oreo. Fallout 4 interiors. Yeah. You know what this house needs? Corpses hanging from the ceiling.
Yeah, man. Like
and that's a little bit barbarian like too. Like, you know, it's not a good camp or fortress unless it's got skulls on spikes, you know, or something, you know. Some dude or skeleton in a cage hanging outside.
Absolutely. Actually, another thing that just sort of like that just sort of occurred to me, mostly because I was just thinking about the Witcher and how sometimes he feels almost like he's a barbarian, even though he's like just really a straight up mercenary.
Mm-hmm.
The trophy thing, right?
That is a huge thing, right? It's not just you've killed something, it's you have something of your enemy that you carry around with you.
Yep. As like proof that you like did the thing you did. So it's not just a brag, it's like, no, I did this. Like, here's the proof.
Right.
And like that's kind of a thing, because like just because you are Bob the Unwashed does not like that boast is very obvious.
Yeah, right. They'll smell him before they can see him.
Correct. But if there's like I don't know, like if there's like Thantrax, the destroyer, like you want to know why he's the destroyer, right? And then so like if he like opens up this like his traveling bag and it's just full of like the not really the skulls, but like the scalps of the people whom he has destroyed, and he's got a whole shitload of them. Yeah, I mean, call him the destroyer, man.
Yeah, right. You take him up on his name while you're alive.
Right.
Oh man, but that, you know, that is another thing about barbarians that is just so freaking cool. It doesn't matter what it is. They're going to destroy it with all of their might until they die.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's magic or some giant beast or an entire civilization. They will do everything in their power to destroy it. Even if it means death, or especially if it means death.
Suicidal, like, not tendency, but like suicidal missions and suicidal goals, like, for the sake of like honor and glory, is totally like this barbarian idea.
Right.
I dig it. I dig that for sure. Hilariously, I think that a lot of like D&D groups, like not just people who are playing barbarians, but like they get into this sort of mode in their mind where they're like, well, if we're gonna die in this battle, I'm just gonna keep fighting until like every man is down.
Right.
It's that is a very sort of like barbarian mentality to take to it, even if you're not playing that particular class. Although I will note that the first person to usually like cut and run is the thief.
Of course, yeah.
Which is funny, given our discussion about Conan calling himself a thief earlier.
Right. That's very interesting. That's sort of like the duality of how you see yourself.
Exactly. But yeah, like I don't know. It's an interesting and complex sort of tradition with barbarians, because it's not.
It's a mixture
tradition.
of honor and dishonor, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, we're not talking about knights in shining armor here. You know, they're not doing the good deeds out of their hearts to win the love of the princess or whatever, or to, you know, show who's most chivalrous. No, they're out to behead someone, put their head on a spike, have stories told about how they put that dude's head on a spike.
Right. I don't know. Like,
it's all like, if you think about it, it's all very selfish and ego driven, right?
Oh no, absolutely.
Like, it's not like
sure.
the glory of, you know, there's a little bit of the, you know, for the glory of my ancestors, but there's a lot of people are going to know my name as a barbarian.
For sure. Now, you bring up an interesting point with the whole comparing barbarians and knights to each other. Because really, I don't see a lot of difference in the two of them.
Oh.
Because knights were assholes. Like,
I see where you're coming from.
Like, yeah, so...
Like, there's the ones that you always hear about in fairy tales, but then there's the, you know, real knights.
Right.
And then, you know, the ones that always kick around their squires and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, like they're...
Yeah. but like knights were just as prone to like horrific violence as barbarians. They just get good stories told about them because ultimately their kingdoms won.
Right, right. And sometimes they're paid. Sometimes it's
Yeah,
because of they have some sort of a royal or high class nature that they're a knight, as opposed to I mean, that's basically what a barbarian is. It's an untrained soldier, right?
yeah,
Without a
exactly.
war banner, without like their training is having survived this long.
Right, exactly. Um, which is why when they come up against like civilized like armies, they fucking fall down, right? Like
Yeah.
there's organization and technology and tactics and like strategy, like even above knowing who to go after right now, which is what tactics is all about. The strategy of this is how we're going to approach these people so that we have the most advantageous like opportunity to destroy them is something that most barbarians didn't get like the benefit of having.
Right.
They yeah, like so there's that whole thing. And Dirge actually said something pretty poignant. Knights fight for like a banner, right? Like somebody else's name. Whereas
Right.
barbarians fight because he said because fuck yeah killing, which isn't necessarily correct. It's because like barbarians fight for their own personal glory and for the continued living of the rest of their tribe, right?
Hmm.
Um, it just sucks because there's like barbarians end up getting the short end of the stick a lot of times, which is why they're sympathetic characters in fiction because they're the underdog.
Hmm. They are, yeah.
Now that is only when we pair them up against knights and people and like Roman centurions and stuff like that, right? Like these armed and armored like warriors who are like from civilized lands. Now, when the barbarians come in and they attack a town full of people whom happen to have vegetables and like meat available for them to eat, like that's then the townsfolk become the sympathetic people in that regard, right? Like it's
Hmm.
all just about which perspective and who's the target and who's not.
Right.
Like, but yeah, like I don't think that there's I don't think generally that there's much in the way of like aside from like mindset that's different with the way barbarians approach a situation and the way like an actual like soldier would.
Now, I do have to say something though.
Go ahead.
Sometimes barbarians do have the advantage over knights. And it's sort of like
Okay.
it's this weird like wild card thing, right? Where
Yeah, yeah,
soldiers they're trained to fight a certain way, they have formations and all this sort of stuff. And then this
yeah,
dude
yeah.
freaking comes down and starts like wildly flailing and they have no idea like how to even tackle this. Like it's almost like their bewilderment of what they see before them is the most danger as opposed to the actual person itself.
Right. Yeah. No, that's legit. Like not having. Okay, so the history of training knights to fight it basically goes something like this: barbarians became civilized. Civilized people realized they needed armies. Armies then trained to fight other armies. When you get to the point where your armies are training to fight armies of civilized people, having the enemy suddenly become untrained and resort to like guerrilla tactics and
Right.
like right and like being unpredictable like is a huge X factor in the favor of the like the barbarian type character, right?
Right.
So yeah, like just having the fucking stones to run at a like Knights Templar when all you've got is a like a fur jerkin
And
and
maybe an
a
actual
flail.
literal stone.
Yeah, yeah.
Like you might actually bring your stones with you. You might have the stone. And you know, sometimes just having those sort of like ambush style, unorganized. I mean, they're agile and strong barbarians, despite
Right,
being not heavily clad in armor. And like
right.
sometimes that speed and ferocity is enough to just throw people off their game.
Absolutely. Yeah, and like also having just unconventional weapons.
That's true, right?
Yeah, because like if if you are not accustomed to fighting. Okay, so let me step back. So Ving, imagine for me that you are an Olympically trained athlete in the in fencing.
Okay, yeah, sure.
So you've got your foil, and then I come at you with a fucking axe.
Right.
What are you gonna do?
Actually, I remember every time I talk about sort of role-playing games that I play, I always talk to my dad about wielding huge weapons, and he always recalls one movie that he saw, and I don't remember what it was, but he always says that he remembers this one moment about dudes who wield giant weapons, and there was a dude with a foil, like literally the situation you described. There was a dude with a foil, and he was attacking some guy with a giant sword. And he was getting cocky and like really like, I can dance around this guy, you know, I'll have him down in no time. And the dude literally just goes whoosh, and like the sword cleaves like into him like that deep, and like his like arms falling off. Like sometimes like there's like advanced tactics, and like sometimes those it's crazy.
Yeah. No, man, that's legit. Like that's real. Like it's
such a difference in training that they have no idea how like barbarians, like they know how to tackle a situation, right? It's I'm clubbing you to death. I'm slicing you to death. I mean, they're I guess you could always sort of drum down any tactics to being that simple too, but
right.
But like when it comes down to actual trained guys, there's like stances and the parries and counters and back steps and all this stuff, and
it goes from being a life or death struggle to being a science or an art that you're like really good at, and like that's the difference in mentality. Like the one guy who's like highly trained is like, my training will save me, and the guy who's not is like, I'm gonna save me because no one else is.
Mm-hmm.
And like that desperation it's important for like turning tides of battle and such.
Right.
So yeah, like that's real.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's just real. And yes, Sturge, that would be pretty good, seeing like just Ving's face pasted on top of a fencer. Like,
now, I have to say, like, the way that I like to play my mythical characters, I'd hate to be a fencer. I really would.
Oh yeah, no, fuck that, man. Like there is one thing that you are super good at, and like that's it. that's what being a fencer is.
Right, exactly. And then of course there's situations where it's like, well, this dude's like heavily clad in armor, and I have a foil. Right. What are you supposed to do now?
Yeah, for sure.
Like there are some weapons that have advantage over some armor types.
Yeah.
Axes are usually good in most cases, just because cleaving is an awesome thing.
Right.
But yes, there are some weapons like the foil where, you know, it's got speed and agility, but it doesn't have the power to get through things really.
For sure.
You always try being a mage and then end up being a knight. Yeah, it's not, I mean, I have those tendencies as well. I like using a lot of magic in sort of any sort of character that I have. But I usually end up wearing either some sort of protective armor or barbarians as in Diablo, Coldzilla. But a little bit of mixture of both, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were actually talking about that, how basically non-Romans.
Yeah, like that exactly.
Right. Anybody who's not part of the empires of barbarian.
Uncivilized folk.
But yeah, I usually like using two-handed weapons. Because mostly it's you don't have to really worry about, is it gonna hurt? It is gonna hurt. What you have to worry about is timing. Are you gonna hit the opponent.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's fair from like a gaming like tactical like point of view, right? Like how much fun do you have with that part of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and like don't get me wrong, dealing a shit ton of damage in like a single hit is always super satisfying.
Yeah, good old Warhammer, Claymore,
Exactly.
nice good battle axe, right?
For sure. Yeah, like I don't know. So actually going to like hit up that part of it. I think there's usually like a question that comes up in like role playing games. It's like, why use one weapon over another, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like there's this funny thing that some games do, which is sort of, it goes to this level of abstraction where they're like, yeah, so there's not like, it's not that there's a good reason to use one weapon over another, so we treat them all the same. It's just about how good you are at using it. But then there's this other method, which is to apply different mechanics to different types of weapons. And I remember in some game, and it may have been Dungeons and Dragons, where where like you had a wider spread of damage for certain weapons, like a battle axe did like a D12 of damage,
Mm-hmm.
which means it deals anywhere between 1 and 12,
Right.
modified by your strength. Whereas like certain other weapons were considered to be like more accurate, but they weren't as like they wouldn't like do as much damage. So it was like I can't remember exactly what it was. I think it was like 3d4, which meant that you were more likely to do like more damage because like the weapon was but there was like less spread, right?
Right. Like the least damage you do rolling 3d4s would be 3. The least damage you could do with a d12 is 1.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's, you're guaranteed more damage if you roll badly, right. But if you roll well,
right. But it's even more complicated than that, though, because like with 1d12, you have an equal chance of rolling a 1 or a 12, regardless. If you're rolling 3d4s, you're gonna hit between 3 and 12, and there's a probability that you're probably going to hit somewhere in the middle.
Right.
You're less likely to get really high numbers and really low numbers the more dice you're rolling, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting one. It's a very interesting concept that's like how people abstract it out. And now that I'm thinking about it, I think it was actually Pathfinder, which is sort of D&D. But anyways, point being that there's like, I don't know, I don't know if there's like a better way, like not better way, but that there's a better way to emulate one weapon being more damaging than the other than just trying to like mess with the math of how much your damage output is.
You know, it's definitely one of those odd things. I like using or viewing weapons as sort of how quickly they can strike.
Right.
Like I always think of Warhammers as the slow weapon that does a high amount of damage.
Right.
Whereas you have someone who wields 2 daggers and they can go crazy, but like a slash from one of those is not as bad as your arm's broken because I hit you with a Warhammer. Yeah, that was just me echoing through some stuff there, but it's good now.
Yeah. But yeah, like that's an interesting thing. Like I dig that, right?
Where it's almost like they could be equal, but it's based on like how many hits you can get on your opponent, right?
Right. Because
it could be that maybe the Warhammer wielder doesn't get a hit in. The guy with the 2 daggers just too damn fast.
Right, for sure.
And he's trying to hit the guy and getting slashed, and he's like stumbling a little. And so there's that, that trade-off of you got a huge damage output, but you got to be sure you're hitting your target and, have the stamina to get away with it. And that's a huge thing in video games, too, is that whole issue of stamina.
Yeah.
And, of course, barbarians apparently have, like, an unlimited amount of stamina.
Right. Um, yeah, like in the moment, right? There's also like stories about how like after a fierce battle, like the barbarian, like the Ted the Unwashed, like slept for 3 days after his fight uh with the enemy, right?
Right.
Like there's sometimes there's this recollection of fatigue that follows like terrible battles like that.
Oh yeah, and
Um,
that's something that happens with Barbarian Rage. There's
yeah, yeah,
usually some sort of cooldown or negative fatigue effect that happens.
yeah,
Like you can't just rage again after you've just raged. There's usually
absolutely,
some sort of time where you just gotta you get knocked out basically.
right. Um, yeah, no, like in fifth edition D&D, like when you use your rage, you have access to like a couple other things that you can do in combat than when you're not raging, but like doing them makes you tired. Like when the rage ends, you get like levels of exhaustion all the way down to like you can like work yourself so hard that you like die.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I enjoy that. I think that's a cool thing that like gets put into the games we play, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you got to be careful about how much you push yourself. You can push yourself and win, like all the way up until the point where your character like is now dead
Right,
because
right.
pushed too hard.
It's not like
Or
DBZ. You can't just pull energy out of frickin' nowhere.
exactly.
Although a
Yeah,
DBZ barbarian would be pretty interesting.
right. I'm trying to think if there is one.
Some like axe wielding Dragon Ball Z character that barbarian rages and then goes Super Saiyan, and
Right,
then
right.
barbarian rages again.
um,
Chain
I don't know.
raging.
Right. In some ways, I think maybe like maybe Trunks in like the very beginning of like the Android Cell Saga, like maybe is kind of like that. He comes back, he like goes Super Saiyan, has his crazy sword, like cuts people up, and then like powers down immediately and is just sort of like, look, I have to conserve my energy. So like I don't know. That's an interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It'd be weird. I don't like as of present. Well, okay, let me rephrase that. So, in the big grand scope of DBZ and barbarians, like the Saiyans are
Yeah,
like
I guess. Well, I mean, if you're going so broad as to say that basically going Super Saiyan is a barbarian rage, then
right,
yeah.
only gifted to a few. But like if you look back at their history, like they're a warring planet. They like are mercenary. They're widely regarded as evil by like civilized planets. Like in a lot of ways, the Saiyans and like their home planet and all that jazz from like the past, not really related to D&D since they're all dead at that point. Or I'm sorry, not D&D, DBZ. Since they're all dead by then, the Saiyans are kind of like this weird barbarians in space.
Space barbarians.
Space barbarians. And so I'm gonna hit that real fast before we like run out the hour.
Okay.
Like in fictions in the history of like novels and like fantasy and sci-fi and all that stuff, there's this weird like intersection where like fantasy and science fiction like sort of coincide. Um, and like that's where you get stories like John Carter of Mars,
Mm,
and
yeah.
like in a lot of ways he's a barbarian to Mars, even though like the whole Mars like political structure is somewhat barbarian like.
Hmm.
But anyways, like there's this like science fantasy subgenre of like fantasy sci-fi, and it's like there's, instead of it being like a technologically advanced like universe, it is a philosophically backwards and fantastical universe in that like there's like crazy magic, like pterodactyls in space, like like there's like whole barbarian tribes and like space pirates and all that jazz, right? Like
Right.
it's some super cool stuff, and it's really interesting to like think about and like want to play.
Yeah,
I don't
combo.
know.
Yeah.
So, anyways, that's my rant about that.
I mean, basically, when you almost anything in space is, you know, fucking cool, right?
Right.
And
Absolutely.
there are definitely like some cool situations where it's sort of like almost history repeats itself, where you see things that definitely remind you of like the barbarian nomadic cultures on other planets, because they're not as advanced, or they're, you know, outsiders to the main civilization of, or something like that. And you do see that occasionally. It's pretty interesting.
But yeah, Convoy, Space Barbarians.
Space Barbarians.
Space
Yeah,
Bear.
yeah.
Well,
Of course, they have like some, you know, spirit aspect raging of like some like 3-horned ape
right.
called a Zigafloketsk.
Exactly.
It's the most ferocious creature.
Isn't it? At least on this planet. No, of any planet.
Of any
see? Right.
Of course, that's you know, some high order to talk about that, right?
Sure is. Sure is. Yeah.
With the flavor of old barbarians, but with the added taste of space. It's like mint chocolate chip.
Oh man, dude, have you ever had space food? It's not good.
No, it's not that good.
Like barbarian space flavor isn't so hot.
Nah, it tastes like sweaty loincloth and blood.
Oh. And the tears of your enemies.
Yeah, a goblet of tears, and
Yes,
and a skull goblet.
Exactly. But really, if I'm gonna be honest, the tears of your enemies are the sweetest. So. Barbarian space jerky. Oh man, now you're getting into some next level stuff, Derge.
Space jerky.
Oh no!
Oh gosh.
Take it away.
Especially not from Sid the Unclean.
Oh no!
Not his loincloth.
I like how we keep going
It hangs
back.
upon the ancient wash rag thing
Yeah,
of infamy. The clothesline. It wafts till this day.
Oh man.
Oh shit. But yeah, I think that's pretty good. We covered a decent bit about barbarians.
I think so too.
I'm a big fan of them. They're
I
this
as
sort
well.
of they're this sort of underdog, but extremely powerful, somewhat honorable, but somewhat like simple culture.
Yeah. For sure.
But yeah, I dig it.
Super cool. Super cool.
Yeah. So cool. I think we're gonna switch over to The Witcher 3 then.
Woo!
So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed our conversation on barbarians. Just as it always is, we have no idea what we're going to talk about next week.
None.
So we'll see. But yeah, we usually start at 5:30, have like an hour where we talk about who knows what, and then I switch over to my main game.
Right. Absolutely.
You like this, Derge? Awesome, cool. So yeah, I'm going to switch over to The Witcher 3. I'm going to put the standby screen on, switch the title and the game played and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, I'll be back in a little bit. So thank you for joining me, Saberwolf.
No problem.
And thank you for joining me, Chat. Thank you. So yeah, I will see you guys in just a bit, and be back with The Witcher. See you in a bit.